Hi, this is Ms. Hadi from Olympian High School. Today I want to introduce you to Chapter 34, which is about World War I. But as part of this 5-minute introduction, I'm going to take a moment to cover a few of the introductory pages in the Traditions and Encounter textbook by Dr. Bentley. This is to introduce you to the time period. If you're taking my AP or Mr. Hammond's or whoever's teaching an AP World History class, AP World History Modern class, just a point that you need to remember. The book starts this last time period at 1914, which is the beginning of World War I. But in the AP World History Modern class, we don't start at 1914. We start the last periodization or the last time period at 1900 to give it less of a Eurocentric focus. As you know, the class only spends or supposed to spend about 33% of its time on Europe so that it can give more broad coverage to other parts of the world. So let's jump into what is happening in this last time period. What are some big historical developments that we need to keep in mind as potential historical context when you're writing essays for the exam, or you're thinking about what's happening in the background that might be related to why another historical process takes place. So I'm going to use the book to show this to you. And as it begins, it's talking about how Europe and European descendants in North America were the most powerful groups in the world, and it talks about why. It describes some of the political revolutions that took place and led to the formation of nation states and how those nation states started to industrialize. We've talked about the process, the historical process of industrialization, how important that was. It gave them the necessary resources, technologies, transportation, communication that they could use to then go to other parts of the world and establish colonies. We talked about that. It is imperialism. We're not going to use the word imperialize. We're going to say imperialist powers colonized. So remember, we've talked about that, so keep that in mind. So what's going to happen after all of those things we've studied before, the formation of nation states and industrialization, is we're going to enter this time period at, well, your book 1914, but in the class 1900, looking at how Europe is going to lose power during this new time period. And there's going to be new powers that start to replace it. So we have all of the issues from before that we've looked at. They're going to intensify. Conflicts between countries, rivalries, competition called national rivalries are going to erupt. We'll see colonial disputes. And the spread of nationalism will also be really important, especially because it's coupled with the movement to rid the colonies to rid themselves of the imperial powers. So it just is giving you a sense of what's happening. We're going to see a global war, World War I, break out. Of course, at the time, they didn't call it the Global War. They called it the Great War. But here, the word great doesn't mean, yay, it's awesome. Here, the word great means big, large. So the war lasts from 1914 to 1918. And towards the end of it, we really see Europe exhausting a lot of its resources and falling from this place of almost like up on a pedestal, being stronger than other parts of the world. And from World War I, or the Great War, we're going to continue our studies in the next chapters to talk about things like the Great Depression, to talk about things like the Communist Revolution that takes place in Russia, which is going to destabilize Russia, lead to an entirely new type of political and economic system. Russia is going to undergo really rapid industrialization with these series of 5-year plans, which you'll read about. And we'll also see nationalist movements develop in a lot of the countries that had been occupied by imperialist powers. Then the next really important thing we'll study between now and the end of this class is the eruption of World War II. Now, our class, we start World War II in China in 1931. But if you were to do a quick Google search of when did World War II start, it would tell you 1939 with the invasion of Poland. But that's not how we start it in our book. Okay? So I just want you guys to know that. And yes, we're going to talk about the Nazis. We're going to talk about all that happens during World War II. And at the end of World War II, we're going to see the weakening of Europe, and into that political vacuum step 2 major economic and political powers. The USSR, the communist government that established itself in Russia after the revolution, and the United States. And these 2 powers are going to be pitted against each other in something called the Cold War, which we'll explore together. There's so much more that's going to happen. We're going to see a lot more interdependence in the world as different nations struggle to deal with problems that are